somebody wouldn't mind closing the last door. Oh, thank you. So hopefully everybody's aware this is the Kitten working group session. If you're not here for that, then I guess you can go back to sleep. Oh, we've got some stragglers. Sorry? Yeah. All right, here's our note well. If you have not seen this yet this week, it's weird. Huh. Cool. So today's agenda, we'll take, as we're getting through the 5 minutes here to go through the preliminaries, then we'll go over working group document status. We'll cover the Kerberos pad, deprecating old Kerberos encryption with Ben. And then Nico's going to present, I believe, the remaining items on this list. Is there anything else we wanted to try to cover? As it is, I think we might end up going over.
Yeah, well, we might not. Depends on how long.
Depends how fast everybody speaks. There we go. All right, well, I'm not hearing any. So, working group status. We've got a couple of documents that were approved by the IESG, CAMAC and GSS Loop. GSS Loop is still in the RFC editor queue. CAMAC, it made it there, but it had to be recalled because the security considerations were lacking.
Yeah, we had somebody try to implement it, and they realized that there was no treatment for cross-realm. We had somebody who was trying to implement it. Someone was trying to implement it, and there was no text that allowed cross-realm CAMACs to be propagated. So that was a bug, and we have to fix it.
Now, we believe there's been a number of suggestions on the list, but we need somebody to assemble those into text to put into the document. And so we're actually soliciting volunteers.
I think Tom is.
Has he done it? Okay. I missed it. All right.
Well, he hasn't sent it out yet, but he's working on it.
We have a number of documents that made it through the working group last call. Sazal OAuth, I think the document shepherd found one issue with scope that, I mean, it's been brought up on the OAuth list. We just haven't heard what, if that's truly the recommendation yet or not.
Yeah, I mean, so far everybody's been happy with the proposed change, and it's pretty minor, so we're probably just going to let it go through and send that on to Stephen.
So 4402 BIS was also in this list. This is one of the 3 BIS documents that we last called simultaneously. So far there's been no major issues, just a number of editorial nits. We're looking for someone to get those assembled and get a new revision out.
Hi, Sean Emery. Yeah, so I think the consensus on the list was that the security considerations section that had the sentence about the denial of service attack for long strings, I think that was pretty much consensus as far as removing that statement, since we believed it wasn't a legitimate concern. Do you agree with that statement, Nico?
Sorry, that was.
Oh, okay. For the PRF draft, or BIS draft, there was a sentence in the security consideration section that mentioned that without integrity protection, that if you use long strings, that it could be used as a denial of service before integrity protection. And I think we agreed that that was not a particular issue. Okay, so I'll go ahead. Yeah, that's goes beyond PRF. Yeah. All right, so I think there's consensus to remove that sentence, and it should be done after that.
Are you going to submit the new version?
Yes, as soon as I get access to that file.
Great. Thank you.
So now we've got 6112 this. I can't speak. Anonymity sport. So this is probably number 3 of those BIS documents that went out to working group last call simultaneously. There is some edits needed. We're not sure if a new last call will need to be issued. That's going to depend on how extensive those edits are. We are also, again, soliciting volunteers to take that work on.
Yeah, I think Sam had submitted the 00 version of the 6112 biz, but Sam is not here today, so I cannot volunteer him. So it's unclear if Sam will be able to actually submit the update or if we need somebody else to do that. Any volunteers?
Sean Emery, I could possibly volunteer, but I can't commit a significant amount of time until probably end of May, if that's acceptable.
It probably is. I mean, we have enough documents in the last call queue that we wouldn't be able to put it to last call again anyway. So.
Okay. All right.
All right. And then finally we have 5653 BIS. This is for the Java binding updates. There is the addition of the GSS exception performed purpose. Excuse me. So there were some issues raised about the stream-based methods, whether output, error token, be sent without API changes. We were wondering if the original authors properly understand the framing of the GSS token and how, sorry, I'm tired.
Yeah. I mean, so the original GSS Java bindings were quite a while ago, and it's hard to get a sense from the mail archives and the minutes about what people were actually thinking at the time. So I guess really the question is, does anybody in the room have an opinion about the Java bindings? Nico is standing up, so I guess we should hear from him.
My opinion is that the stream stuff should go, but it's not terribly important whether it goes or not. My impression is not that the original authors felt that the API could do all the wire encoding, for the application, but rather that one would create a stream out of a single token and say, here's a stream for you to consume. So it's sort of like an STDIO stream from a memory buffer kind of a thing.
Sure. So this is sort of what I think it was Thomas Maslin was saying on the list?
Yeah, that's my impression. So it's not important if it stays or if it goes. There is one organization that actually uses self-framing tokens, and that's the GSI folks. They have a mechanism that speaks TLS, and because TLS is self-framing, if you just put the tokens on the wire without any additional framing, you have a GSS interface to TLS.
Right. I mean, the Kerberos mechanism is self-framing as well.
No.
Huh?
No.
I thought it used the generic framing everywhere.
No. It doesn't have a length. And the ASN1 little header with the OID, that was only in all tokens in RFC 1964. In 4121, we removed it from the per message tokens. So not even that is present. So 4121 is not self-framing, but TLS is, and so one could, in fact, use this the way people thought this was intended to be used, but I think it was intended to be used as, here's a stream containing a single token, or produces, push a single token into this stream.
Sure.
And I think that's okay, but kind of useless.
Yeah, I mean, I have a draft email that I haven't sent yet that I tried to do some more research about the historical origins, but it's still pretty inconclusive. So I think we're just going to have to take it to the list and see what consensus we can get there.
All right, so now we have some other documents that are in our queue. We've got the ASCTS HMAC SHA-2, the PK init freshness, and the GIST API extensions IANA. There's also a number of documents that are not yet ready.
Did anybody have anything they wanted to say about the documents in the last call queue?
Yes, I've been sort of AWOL on the extensions IANA draft, but I would like to help move that along again. If you'll let me know what's up with that. Is it on the queue, or is it in? I'm sorry. Okay, great. Oh, so there's nothing else to do. It's just.
Yeah, we're going to publish the document with just a couple of example registrations, and then populate the registry externally to the document.
Great. Okay.
So the last major, Alexei Melnikov, the last major thing was lack of examples to verify that it's actually sensible. So, which after year and a half of delay, with Sean's help, we added. So I think that's fine.
Thanks.
So then we also have a number of documents that we don't believe are yet ready for a working group last call. I believe yeah. So SAML EC. Scott has been very busy, so there hasn't been any progress other than the new version posted in December. We are wondering if anybody has read this document yet. One hand? Okay. So reviews of this would be very useful if anybody would please work on those. Then we've got IANA Curb. This has been posted an update in October. Again, have we had anybody that's read it? Sean again? All right. Okay. So we do need some more review and comment to help us figure out if there are more edits or if we really are ready to put this into the queue of documents to push forward to working group last call.
Yeah, this came up recently on Curb Dev about negotiation issues with negotiating mechanisms that you don't know might succeed and how that might affect protocols where you really have to succeed or else you have a bigger problem. And it occurs to me that we should have a mechanism. By the way, this is Nico. We should have a mechanism attribute for indicating that this is one of those mechanisms that you've no idea might succeed. Because there are applications that really don't want to try a mechanism that might not succeed. So even if the server offers it, the client may not actually really have the ability to continue.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Nico. Now we got Curb Auth Indicator, the authentication indicator for Kerberos. The first working group version came in February. It's only 4 pages, so it's not a big read. Has anybody gone through it yet? Read it? Got a few more hands. One of the things is, do we need any more examples into this document? All right. So if those that have read it, maybe take another think about this, and then we could see if there's more updates needed before we see about progressing. Okay. Now we got GS2 BIS. Need to update, so there's desire to update GS2 spec to allow for mechanisms that don't have the ability to do mutual author channel binding. There's a number of comments on the list that haven't been addressed. We would need some help for somebody to go through the list, try to find what these are, and gather them up. At one time, Alexia had volunteered to make updates. There are 3 messages on the mailing list. Okay. 2 from Simon, 1 from Nico. So some of it, this might need more. Okay. So Alexia believes there's only 3 messages. There's only 3 messages on the list. 2 of them saying we need updates, and Nico then suggesting also some of those references. So does the working group still want to move forward on this? Is any? Okay. All at one time. All right. Well, then I guess we can look forward to an update from Alexei at some point. All right. Now we've got the channel-bound flag. Implementations don't always match the spec with regard to criticality. There's currently no way to incrementally upgrade an application from no bindings to using them without a flag day. This draft has been expired for quite a while. I can't remember what the date was. Is there still interest in trying to move forward on this?
I am interested in moving forward on this, but I don't have cycles for a little while. So if you're willing to wait a couple of months, I can pick it back up. Well, I'm not sure that the current state is correct, and so I actually need some help thinking through it because it's falling out of my cache.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's been a couple of years, so I think we can wait a couple more months.
Okay.
Is there anybody willing to help Nico go through that state check?
Okay.
Yeah, just for the mic, somebody called IDRA in the Jabber room would like to see it move forward, and also can help Nico with it.
Okay. So we'll probably find each other on the Jabber room and chat.
That's right. IDRA is CMO. I always forget that.
So now we've got, so next up we've got PKInit algorithm agility. This updates PKInit to remove structures tied to particular algorithms in favor of negotiation. Where this document did expire in 2012. So there is a desire to do we do believe there's future-proofing necessary in the eventually. Bill Mills had volunteered to edit, but chairs have dropped the ball on what changes were actually needed. I think we finally got him the source, which took some doing, and then we kind of lost track of where we were going from there.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, we did actually give him like 2 changes to make, and then there was a 3rd issue where we never produced actual text for inclusion, and so we just need to pick that up again.
Bill in the Jabber room says, I believe there is only one remaining change that needs to be decided.
Okay. If we could just revive that onto the list, and then that should be able to help Bill finish up the edits. Anybody that was familiar with that can do that. That would be greatly appreciated. IANA registries. Tom has listed some help in verifying them, but this has been an ongoing activity that's gotten a little stalled that we've promised to do quite a while back.
Quite a while means like 10 years.
Yes, Sean Emery. Yeah, there was a couple of people that had volunteered to verify the registries that Tom had set up. One of those was Michko, which I don't think is here, from Microsoft, and Luve from Apple. I'm not sure where they're at, but
Yeah, I got a mail from Tom that says, he thinks we can probably get it taken care of by the next IETF meeting, or maybe the one after that. But he would like some help setting up sort of intermediate milestones so that we don't have a huge, giant task that we try to do all at once, but we can break it up into smaller pieces. So we can probably take that to the list.
All right. Now we've got a number of documents that are not in the working group. The pad, triple des, triple die, that's what, yeah. So this is the point we can go into some other people here. Yes? If we could do this on a mic, please.
Nico here. Alexei mentions the TLS unique channel binding, but it, and the possibility that it needs to be replaced. But the thing that really needs to happen is that TLS needs a session, a cryptographic session ID, which is what one of the drafts for the TLS working group does, and TLS 1.3 will have that. And once you have that, we can either use that session hash or use the existing TLS unique. It doesn't change in its specification, but the hash draft takes care of adding the missing binding internally in TLS.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to channel Simon, that he thought that it would be better if we standardize a different one, while this situation is unresolved with, and in case people don't implement the session hash.
I don't know how hard it would be to deploy a new channel binding type. Also, what we would have to do effectively to do it right is to say you have to have the session hash extension, and then you have to use that as the channel binding. So one way or another, you're going to have the session hash thing. So if the idea is to make progress without 1.3, TLS 1.3 out, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think people are going to sign up for specifying and reviewing a new channel binding type that works with the older TLSs. But if Sam is willing to, then perhaps we can get the energy going for that. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think Alexei had been mentioning this to me in a hallway conversation, and in particular that there was a document from Simon that was relevant for this, but I think I failed to find the document when I was looking this morning.
I can send the link to the mailing list. I'll dig it out. I mean, Simon done the work. The question is whether actually existing implementations will add APIs or ways to get it. I think the point is a bit moot because they might not have access to the TLS unique anyway. Obviously, for Simon, probably can easily add it to GNU TLS. Well, this is at least Simon raised it as an issue, as a dependency for the Scram SHA-256 document. He thinks that we need to point to a channel binding, required channel binding, which is non-broken. Known not to be broken, at least, rather.
This is really something we need to ask of the TLS working group, that they need to actually specify that implementations must output some of these things. Yeah. So, hopefully they'll deprecate the key exporter or make it better, and hopefully they'll produce they'll say that implementations must produce the channel bindings of the various types. And this is something that we should ask them for. So I don't know how we liaise. I guess one of us just goes on the mailing list, but it would be nice if we actually had some
It's probably would
some
be
oomph behind it.
slightly more official if chairs, if we help chairs to draft a message and send it to a TLS working group.
Yeah, the chairs can either post the TLS list or talk to the TLS chairs in person.
But we are on a Friday afternoon, but that would
Yeah,
have been a better
Right,
discussion
it's a
early
little
in the
late
week.
for an in-person discussion, but if individuals are willing to help us craft the message, we'll be more than happy to forward it to the TLS working group.
Okay.
Ben Kaduk channeling Bill Mills from Jabber. Bill says there's a token binding working group that also needs the real channel bindings. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people that that need the actual session hash and whatnot.
All right. We're ready for...
Okay. Oh, good. We can fit the entire slides up there. So I am Ben, one of your co-chairs. Simo is not here, but Simo had wanted to talk about the pad concept and to some extent draft. So I said I was familiar enough with it to be able to talk about it. So sort of the background is that POSIX is sort of a single OS instance spec. It talks about the local identity information, but the POSIX standard doesn't talk about remote systems or remote identity and whatnot information. So there's not a standard way to have sort of central user and group data that gets distributed to all those the systems that the user logs into. Lots of places do use LDAP for this, but it can be frustrating, and there's some drawbacks to requiring LDAP for that. Next slide, please. So this concept that we came up with several years ago, I think before I was even involved, was this ability to put the POSIX profile in the auth data in a Kerberos ticket. And so then the OS, if it trusted the KDC, would be able to populate the group information and similar things just from the Kerberos ticket that it's already using for authenticating the user. But of course, you need the information to be secure and authenticated, that the KDC has actually issued it, even if you can only perform some of these lookups about the authorization data at the initial authentication. And so that means that this pad, the extra POSIX data, might be coming back to the KDC from other service tickets multiple times. And so we really need the CAMAC container is superior to like the KDC issued container for this sort of data. So like basically, people, I think the history is that people started wanting the pad, they realized they needed the CAMAC, and they started working on the CAMAC, and we've only just now finished the CAMAC, so we can start getting back to thinking about the pad. So yeah, I mean, usually this would be something that you populate and generate at the initial authentication when you get the TGT, but you could also do some modification if you need to. Next slide. So the use cases for this, and my understanding is that Simo has actually had customers coming in and asking for this sort of thing. So there might be applications that can handle Kerberos tickets, but they don't necessarily know how to get to the LDAP server or whatever server you're using for these extra user data. Or there could be a network topology issue. There could be cross-realm setups that are sort of similar, where the relying Kerberos server just simply cannot talk to the user data server. Maybe it's in a different realm. I know that Nico and I think Victor have been talking about these setups where you have like an initial KDC and then you sort of send your tickets outside and you can't get back. And there have been some other issues relating to this case with like what initial realm you talk to for your KDC requests and things like that. So there do seem to be scenarios where this sort of issue comes up, and you might not be able to talk to the authoritative server from the party that's receiving the Kerberos ticket. Next slide. So just sort of the general sort of data that you would put into this are, of course, the username, which is not necessarily the principal name, user ID number, group ID, home directory, shell information. That's actually a typo. It's not 2037, but 2307, which is the LDAP schema for this sort of stuff. And you can have the group memberships, multiple groups, and sort of the origin of where the groups are. If you have Kerberos principals from multiple different realms, you could have those consolidated into a single group namespace and still track which original realms they're from. Next slide. And then there's optional data you could have if there are alternate usernames or identifiers, maybe nickname, though maybe the nickname is Nagekos, I forget. But just sort of other things that might be useful but are not always necessarily going to be present. And I guess we could be flexible. So if there's a case where you don't actually have a POSIX compliant group server or group information, we could also come up with something to accommodate that within the pad. We would not necessarily be strictly tied to the POSIX concepts. I think there's one more slide. Yeah, so there's this old draft, which is long expired, which is from the original discussions. But we would definitely be modifying it. We're not entirely sure exactly what modifications those would be, but it would certainly be changes to like the prose text and possibly to the protocol data structures as well.
This is Nico. So the UIDs and GIDs really need to be qualified with a point of origin. And there could be multiple ones. And so this starts looking like SIDS with a little bit of compression, and that's fine, and it's good. And the NFS people might actually care for this. There's a draft for Federation for NFS v4, which this would be very useful there. Remember that the UIDs and GIDs are really all local to something. They're all local. So when you're dealing with someone else's local UIDs and GIDs, you have to have some sort of mapping. And in many cases, for one domain, one source identifier, the mapping will be an identity function. But for others, it will be something else. And this exists in various implementations. So you really need that source identifier. And you need to be, and especially as you cross realms and add or remove some of these group memberships, you need to be able to identify the source of each of them.
Okay,
Right,
so you think that the group and user ID numbers need additional qualification?
They need a qualifier. They all need a qualifier. But you really want to send them as qualifier and then set of UIDs and GIDs that are local to it. And you want a set of all of that. And so it really looks like SIDS.
So just to cover, the identifier associated with these is distinct from the Kerberos realm?
Possibly, yeah. Because a lot of environments tend to have multiple Unix domains or whatever, where for one reason or another they'll have different assignments of the same UIDs and GIDs, but they only really have one realm, and it's historical. You have to deal, but also even if the identifier is the realm, right? As you cross realms, and you add group memberships, perhaps. Right, each KDC maybe adds some. Yeah. You really are crossing namespace boundaries. Definitely. So you really, really have to have this. Unavoidable.
Okay, I guess I also failed to mention that Microsoft has a very similar concept, the pack.
They do, yeah.
And that's sort of the inspiration for this.
And in fact, I would just use the pack, but I would just define a mapping of POSIX identifiers to SIDS and then just use that.
Yeah, Sean Emery. In addition to what Nico just said, it'd also be nice to see a GSS API interface defined as well in order to
I think Nico's going to talk about that.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I think that's it for pad. Oh,
Stephen Powell. Yeah, just on that one. Do I remember wrong from many years ago that there was some Microsoft IPR on their way of doing this? Yeah. Is it long enough?
microphone, Nico.
Well, so first of all, their IPR, I don't know anything about it. Sure. So I could only speculate. But if the IPR is about carrying this kind of data in your tickets, then you've lost already. The moment you want to carry it. Another thing, by the way, that I wanted to rewind and mention is, this is a very nice network optimization for your directory servers. It's a very not nice network optimization for everything else, because you're carrying these big tickets now, where they should have been smaller. So one of the extensions that I'm proposing for multiple round trips allows a service to give you a smaller ticket in exchange for your big one, right? It's kind of like session resumption for TLS. So you're going to want that. But then the last pessimization that's involved here is people tend to have fairly long-lived tickets, right? TGTs at least. And of course, oh, you got added to a group, you need to log in again. Or, oh, you got removed from a group, we need to find a way to revoke all your tickets. So these are problems that come up when you start using this carrying your authorization data in your tickets. On the other hand, there are use cases where this is really the only way, right? As you mentioned, there are services that will not have access to LDAP. And so you really need something. But yeah, as far as the IPR, I think it's a lost battle. If Microsoft has IPR and they wanted to extract something from implementers.
No, that's not I think the only thing about IPR is there was something related to this in the past. I don't remember if there was a declaration, an IETF declaration about it from Microsoft. But it's something that maybe it might be a good thing to check somehow.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it was definitely before my involvement, so.
It's for implementers to check. It's their problem.
Okay, I think we have another presentation, and I will stay up here.
There we go.
So yes, deprecating RC4 and triple des for Kerberos. Very exciting. So I named the draft des die 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 because it's a fun name. Greg was saying maybe it should have been arc4 please go away, because maybe it's not quite so urgent as single des was. But maybe not. There are these persistent rumors about RC4 vulnerabilities that we don't have any concrete data on. So I don't really know. And I guess in terms of motivations, there are some reasons why we want to do both of them at the same time if we're going to deprecate things. So these are both, I guess these are the last non-CFX types for the GSS mechanisms. So with these are the old ones. You do not get acceptor subkeys. Acceptor subkeys are useful for avoiding replay caches in some situations. It also lets us almost get rid of 1964. There's just a handful of things left in 1964 other than these ENC types. These are the only two ENC types that we have context deletion tokens specified for. Everywhere else it's just an empty message. Ignore the bullet point about GSS channel bindings. I was confused when I was writing the slides. But in some sense they're both starting to get weak, and our experience getting rid of single des has shown us that it really does take a long time to get people to stop using these things. So we should start soon. Maybe we should have started 5 years ago. Yes, it's an implementation issue, but we should be giving guidance to people that they should stop doing these things. Next slide. Or Sean, you want to say something?
Oh yeah, there's some interesting things like for Windows 2003 compatibility mode, in which it uses the R4 HMAC with AES keys, for instance, as opposed to, so you have a new server in a 2003 compatible realm. So I don't know if that that's been explored, but as far as the security properties. But it's going to take, I think, a really long time for some of those domains to migrate.
Sure, I guess I'm not sure I understand correct. So are they just taking the actual key material from the AES key
Yes.
and using that as
that for the
RC4?
R4 HVAC.
I did not realize that. That's interesting.
So it took me a while to figure out what they were doing.
Right. So I guess tying very closely into that, one of the reasons to get rid of RC4 is that the string to key function is really, really bad. So if you're not using the RC4 string to key function in that scenario, that's interesting. So of course the string to key function is unsalted MD4. So you have a single rainbow table for all users in all realms. And you can populate that rainbow table very quickly. Then, of course, there's the RC4 keystream biases that we're hearing about in TLS land quite a lot in the news recently. Kenny is in the room. And again, there's these possible other attacks against the cipher that I personally don't know anything about. But the really big issue for RC4 is the cross-protocol issue, because the whole point of the RC4 Kerberos ink type was that the Windows systems could transparently migrate to using Kerberos instead of NTLM. And so because of that, the existing NT password hash was used directly as the Kerberos key. And so that's why the lack of the salt came into play and the sort of funky Unicode stuff. And so with the NT password hash, apparently there are some ways, some scenarios in which an application server ends up with NT password hash if it's doing NTLM protocol, and then it happens to have the Kerberos key as well. And that's a really nasty cross-protocol attack. I do not know the details of that. If you do know scenarios in which that happens, please pipe up. I would love to hear about it and have more text in the draft. And so I guess we sort of alluded to this already, but getting rid of RC4 is going to be hard because it's in some of these old Windows systems, Windows XP, Windows Server 2003. Those systems only support single DES or RC4. Luckily, they're going EOL real soon now. But the other sort of related issue with these Windows systems, if you have cross-realm trusts that were generated back with the Windows Server 2003, those are still going to be the RC4 keys, and redoing the cross-realm trust is, or the cross-realm key is still pretty challenging. Nico is, I think, going to be talking about related issues later on. And there are probably other reasons why getting rid of it will be hard. I don't know what they are right now. I'm happy to hear more and flesh out the draft.
Oh.
So then moving on to triple DES. Triple DES is not quite as bad as RC4. Again, the main, a big concern here is the string to key function, which is just enfold, and enfold is pretty lousy. Yeah, enfold is pretty lousy. The block size, again, being DES-based is 64 bits, so you could get cipher block collisions with the birthday attack after 2 to the 32 encryptions. Some people might worry about that, some people might not. The ciphertext collision would just be revealing like a couple blocks of plain text. It would not be a full compromise, which you would get with some of the AEAD modes if you reuse a nonce. So it's not too bad. Triple DES is also, of course, very slow. But those are sort of the main complaints. And so if I'm expecting any pushback on this proposal, I'm sort of expecting it here because, triple DES is perhaps not super bad, so maybe we don't need to start deprecating it right now. I personally still think that we should start the process because it's going to take a while. But I'm happy to hear from people who think otherwise. Because Microsoft never implemented, Microsoft never shipped an implementation of triple DES as far as I know. So we're really talking just the Unix implementations, and if you're deploying anything new, it's going to be able to do AES as well as triple DES. Next slide. So yeah, that's all I've got for the presentation. Does anybody have any thoughts they want to share? Additional attacks? Complaints about the proposal?
Kenny Patterson. I'm asking a question from a point of ignorance rather than being informed. Are the keys that you're using in these algorithms full strength, full entropy keys, or are they derived from user passwords?
They can be both. So the Kerberos protocol, well, I guess the encryption type profile requires you to provide a string to key function for generating keys from passwords, and also a random to key function for just turning random data into a key. I think for the RC4 type, the random to key is just the identity function, but the string to key function does take a password input.
Right. So if your keys are not full strength keys, then biases in RC4 are the least of your worries. Because you just do you do a dictionary attack.
Right. Yeah,
as you well know, I guess.
Yeah, and the dictionary
So,
is really bad.
Okay. So yeah, rainbow tables, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but then I think getting rid of RC4 is not your priority.
Getting rid of RC4
Is not the priority. You know, getting rid of a protocol that relies on user passwords as the source of all keys is probably your priority. Particularly one that's vulnerable to dictionary attacks.
Right.
You want a PAKE-based thing if you're going to do anything at all.
Right. And we'll hear about that later.
Sean Emery, we do have mechanisms for PKInit and FAST that protect users' passwords. So.
Yeah, but you're not really going to be able to deploy FAST or PKInit on a system that only speaks RC4. So. Well, maybe PKInit. I'm not sure. Okay, I think that is it for the Ben show, and it's time for the Nico show. So.
I can read this. I'm not sure what the context of it is.
Oh, this is the elimination of.
Right, so Bill Mills said, I suspect that this will end up being driven by things like PCI and other business security standards, which would kill the older OS versions in compliant environments. Compliant in quotes.
Yes, I guess PCI compliance may at some point require not using these old systems, and then they go away, which would be nice.
All right. Nico?
Right. So there's a variety of things that I would like to have done. This is one of them, and I'll probably do some implementation soonish. The idea here is that we would like to be able to do fast crypto in GSS applications. We have some applications that, for example, KNC, it's sort of a Kerberized netcat, only it's really GSSified netcat. And it really wants to speak per message tokens as fast as possible. And right now, the crypto is the limit for one of our applications. And so we'd like some OCV or GCM or one of those AEAD cipher modes. And we've had this discussion many times in the context of Kerberos, and it basically all comes down to, for Kerberos itself, it's a no-go because of the use of long-term keys where we couldn't really provide enough assurances as to IV non-reuse. And generally, IV reuse for AEAD ENC types is fatal to security. So the only places where we can really use these cipher modes is in session key contexts, where we're using a session key. And the obvious one is GSS. There aren't really any Kerberos applications, not very many, that use the curve priv and curved safe messages, PDUs. So we don't really need this for Kerberos in general. We only really need it for GSS. This fits perfectly into 4121. It's a very small modification. The only question really for me is, should we share an ENC-type namespace, or should we define another ENC-type negotiation payload for GSS, right? And this is a bit tricky here because of the way ENC-type selection is handled in the ENC-type negotiation. Really, it's the server sending back an AppWrap encrypted in the ENC-type that it chose from the ENC-type negotiation payload. So obviously there would be some impact on Kerberos, but anyways, That's,
Yeah, I mean, just in Ben Kaduk, just in terms of the ink type namespace registry, I mean, there's already a bunch of ink types in there which have very serious limitations on what context you're allowed to use them in.
right.
I guess maybe some people think that was a mistake, but I haven't heard anyone
Being
feeling
able to
strongly.
use the existing ink type namespace is convenient. It's just a little less work to do. We would still need a new apparat message, with a new field or extensibility or something by which the server can indicate that, yeah, this is the ink type we're going to be using.
Sure.
But it's really a no-brainer either way, so it's just the one question I have before I really start implementing. What do people want as for ink type number space? There's always the possibility that we'll later want to actually add ways to use these AEAD ink types in Kerberos with additional IV derivation from other random or whatever for Kerberos PDUs, non-session key PDUs. We'll see. I don't really care. Next slide. And so this is more of the same thing. So next slide. The next thing is Kerberos is a one round trip protocol, or really a half round trip and a one round trip, and it doesn't handle error recovery very well at all. So if your service ticket is just expired or not valid yet, or you have clock skew issues, or any number of things, perhaps the server got rekeyed, perhaps, any number of issues like this, the server basically will send you an error back, and you're done. And if you're doing this in a protocol like SSH with GSS key exchange, where failure of the key exchange is fatal, the connection dies, right? And then the user has to rerun his command or whatever. It's very painful. So the thing we'd like to do is to have automatic recovery from some of these cases, where the client says, hey, by the way, I can also handle more round trips, and the server can say, if there's an error, the server can send back the curb error with an indicator that I've returned continue needed to the service application. And if you can recover, you can send me another context token with the new ticket, the new whatever, and the new authenticator, and we'll go, right? So there's a draft for this. I think it's got most of. I think it's close to right. So I think hopefully it won't take a lot of work to review. And I'd like to see it adopted or else shepherded. But this is very desirable in some environments. So, yeah, I think I've described most of it. There's also the rcache avoidance. It also gets you user to user, right? You get a ticket, or even if you don't really have a ticket, you got the KDC told you, oh, this guy can only do user to user. Well, you send a bogus initial context token. The service says, hi, you can do multiple round trips, and here's my TGT that you need to use for getting a user to user. Bingo, you got user to user. This also handles rcache avoidance in some ways. We need to make sure that the initial context token can't be replayed against some other service that's also using the same long-term keys. But other than that, this handles replay cache avoidance. Replay caches are really, really hard to get right. And in a clustered environment, extremely difficult to get right. Some of the stuff I've seen on zero RTT data in the TLS working group has me very concerned, because Kerberos has been trying to use a replay cache for decades, and it's not really, none of the implementations have really gotten it right.
Yeah, to that respect, Jean-Emery, I think this, would be very helpful. Like you said, a lot of the applications, a lot of the services are moving away from, shared services. Luckily, there's a few Windows 2000 clients around there, but In any case, I think this is a major issue that we find, and usually the avoidance of replay cache corruption is just to put a lock around the acceptor, which is not ideal.
It kills performance. I
Yeah.
mean, we did, a while back I did some work on avoiding, the need for F-syncs and so on, and that improved RCache performance greatly, but there were still many ways in which the RCache in the standard Kerberos implementations out there are just no good, right? The RCaches are just really, really hard to get right. So we need to do this. Fortunately, for a lot of applications, it's kind of a non-issue. All the applications where the client sends the first per message token, if you're using new ENG types, RFC 4121 ENG types, it just works out if you don't have an RCache. But it's an accident, right? So it's a happy accident. We should do something about it. In the cases where we know that this is okay, like there are no non-accidental happiness cases, then we don't need additional round trips. But anyways, next slide. Then there's PK cross. Manual cross-realm keying is terrible. Some implementations don't even have multiple key sets per principal, and manual cross-realm key rollover necessarily results in breakage. And so you have to turn your ticket lifetimes down a lot to try to avoid that. This doesn't solve that, but still, it's a manual process. The operators learn the keys. It doesn't scale. It's one of the biggest problems with Kerberos scalability. Next slide. And so the rough idea is basically get a certificate from your local realm, vouching for your identity, and then you go do PK init at a remote realm. So it's not really PK init anymore. And if you add a little bit of Dane, we can actually build PK cross that scales on web scale. I'll go back for a bit. There's ways to do persist such a PK cross keyed cross realm trust. There's ways to do it where the keys are ephemeral, right? And there's ways to do it where the clients do all the work, and there's ways to do it where the TGSs do all the work for clients that don't support it. It has some privacy features that are desirable. I think it would be good. Next. And then there's name attributes. There's a variety of name attributes that we'd like to have. Some of them can be generic. There are things like, oh, the peer, your peer is a host-based service, and here's a service, and here's a host name, and this is the issuer. The issuer could be a CA name, PKIX name, or it could be a Kerberos realm, or it could be any number of other things. Trust validation path should be available. A variety of things should be available. For users, of course, username and local names. So local username, right, and so on. Is there another slide?
That's it.
Okay. There are other things that I didn't put on this slide are the impersonation attribute, which is a way of saying, I'm using this Kerberos principle that really has no access to no authorization to anything except to a small number of other services. To those services, it can impersonate anybody, right? This is for middleware. So no need for credential delegation, no need even for constrained credential delegation, because S4U has issues with cross-realm. You can't loop back to your home realm. And in some environments, that's a problem. With this impersonation attribute, when a middleware thing wants to impersonate someone to someone else, it just basically acquires a credential for itself, but with this impersonation attribute for its name, saying, I'm impersonating this other person. And this works safely because if the service it's trying to impersonate to doesn't understand this, it's just going to see the middleware's principal name, which is not really authorized to anything. And if it does understand it, it's going to extract the attribute and say, oh, you're impersonating Nico, and You know, I'm just going to check that you are authorized to do this, and there we go. Right? So it's very lightweight impersonation, very, very lightweight credential delegation, if you like. No credential delegation. And then there's the pad stuff, right? Access to the CAMAC, to payloads of the CAMAC, access to parts of the pad. Those are no longer generic, but we need to actually do that too. And actually, they would be generic in some sense, right? Just because it's only Kerberos carrying those things doesn't make them Kerberos specific. So that's it for me. If there's any interest on any of these things, some of these we'll definitely move ahead on. The GSS types almost certainly will implement, and we'd like either shepherding or making this a working group item.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Hadek, just with the pad and the naming attributes, I mean, the pad is the POSIX authorization data, and so that's pretty generic. So I think that would fall under generic. Okay, so we should pull up the other slides. Yeah, so then there's this McCallum Kitten curb service discovery. We had some discussion on the list about this. This is sort of like a new URI scheme for using DNS lookups to find Kerberos KDCs and similar services to potentially replace the existing serve records and reduce the number of DNS queries you need. So I guess, you know, hopefully people have been following the list and seen this. Just want to check if anyone had comments they wanted to make at the mic about it.
I'm in support of this draft. Yeah.
Okay, I think the next slide is on the Kitten impersonation naming attribute, which was Nico's thing, but you covered it. Yeah. Okay, so before we get to open mic, can we go back up to the summary slide with the list of documents? Yeah. So we've got all of these documents. There's 8 items here. That's a lot of things. Not very many different people have been getting up to the mic to talk about them. So, you know, we would want to get some sense of how many people have actually read or understand the different documents, and then after that we can try and get a sense of, you know, how much support there is for adopting the different documents.
So a couple of things with the GSS extensions IANA registry. Perhaps we can drop 2 of these, right? The generic naming attributes and the impersonation naming attributes. Perhaps that should all just be expert reviewed registrations, and we can just go straight to IANA.
Perhaps. I mean, I think some of those might be sufficiently important that we do want the higher level of review.
Perhaps.
It is slower.
But if there's a question of load, I think we can always go that way. The others, I don't think have any lightweight approach. We either adopt them or
Sure. So I'm just going to go down the list and ask for like a show of hands who has read the different documents or, you know, is familiar with them. So. See? Who's read first? Yeah. So we're just going to go through all of them, asking you who's read or is familiar. So who has read the pad or thinks they know what it is? 4 people. Who has read the die. A few more. Who has read the KERP5 extra round trip? Just a few. The GSS only ink types I think was just Nico's mail, but who read that mail? Slightly fewer. The PK cross proposal, who read that? The generic naming attributes, who read that? We're looking at the same handful of people here. The Kerberos, The Kuros service discovery. Who read that? Did I read that? Actually, I'm not sure I read that. Again, three people. The impersonation naming attributes. Who read that? Just 2 people. I didn't read that.
And who is here just reading their email? That's what I thought. There we go. Okay, so I think it's premature for us to try to make any calls for adopting anything just yet, but we could take this to the list. I mean, it's a little it's not really a good idea to try to adopt things that nobody's actually looked at, but.
So the one thing.
That's true. So, sure. I think we're about to hear from our illustrious AD.
Yeah, Sean Emery. I would like to see a few of these adopted, maybe not all. I don't know if we have enough energy to take all of these on. In the past, it's been difficult to get energy to review all these sufficiently. So just a warning or caveat on that. But I think the pad draft, speaking as an individual, of course, since I'm kind of in a quasi state of co-chair and individual contributor, the triplet as die, I think is important. Extra round trip is also important and solves a number of real world issues. PK cross, I'm not as much in demand for, but naming attributes I think is also important as well, that we get some standards.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we should try and have a thread on the list to ask, we've got all these potential topics, which ones are people more interested in, which ones are less interested in, do we have enough energy to go forward with some of these, and which ones?
Right, Stephen, yeah, so what I got up to suggest was maybe, I mean, the energy level in this working group has been an ongoing thing, but still people keep managing to do good work, just not at a tremendously high pace, but that's okay. I mean, I would suggest maybe not just asking who's interested, but you try and prioritize them. I mean, some of them.
Yeah, I was intending to say prioritization, and I think I failed to say that.
Yeah, because obviously Nico's interested in everything. So that's but you might think that some of these are higher priority than others.
No, I do. I mean, I do think that at least 3 items here can be IANA kinds of things. The pad. I would volunteer to review the pad as an expert, and
That wasn't his question. He was trying to sucker you.
No, I know. Well, he's asking me if I would be the expert and the registrant, right?
Well, the expert reviewer for the registry, right?
Yeah, well, for my own registrations, which is probably not good. No, so we'd have to find someone else to be a reviewer for that, but I'm sure we could. So at least 3 of these items could go that way, and the die one, I think, I think that one should be a real easy one, right? I mean, listing the attacks is not necessary. Like, being extremely thorough is nice, but if that's a problem in terms of energy for reviewing, look, everybody knows single des is not a good idea, and RC4 is not a good idea. So just basically tell people to stop doing it, and that's easy enough. Move some bits of, perhaps do the RFC 1964 biz that is really 4121 plus the missing bits, and just drop 1964 to historic, but I don't know. PK cross, perhaps the easiest way to deal with that one is implement and let people use it, and if 2 years down the line people actually want to standardize it, we could, right? So that's, that one I think doesn't necessarily need to be adopted. The only ones that really need to be adopted in terms of review from the working group are the service discovery, extra round trip, and GSS only end types. Those are not, there's no other way to do those, I don't think. So the des die 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 one I think would be easy to shepherd outside the working group if need be, because it's so obvious, right? I don't. It's just people should just stop using it. Triple des.
Triple des.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, triple des. That's
yeah.
Okay. I just got the joke.
Triple des, triple die. Yep.
Yeah. Well, those I think can go to the registry directly. I mean.
Sean had asked if the last naming attributes could be rolled into the generic naming attributes.
Oh yeah, it could be. Yeah, I could do that. I could definitely do that.
Okay, so
I didn't do that because I didn't know if people would think it was a bad idea. So I thought that impersonation attributes perhaps needed some review, but I think it's also fairly obvious, right? So it's you can't use it by accident. If you're using it, you should be using it with a credential that really has no authorization other than to do this with specific peers, right? So I think that one definitely goes in generic. Finally, the last thing I would say is the generic naming attributes is a very nice way, treating names as opaque, but having both a display form and a query form and a bag of attributes you can access with a simple interface. Actually, is applicable outside of GSS as well, right? It's perfect for TLS as well, right? If you want to provide applications with access to something a little simpler than here's a certificate chain and you go have your own ASN1 PKIX parser thing, that'd be handy, right? So one of the attributes is, yes, I validated it up to a trust anchor, and here's the trust anchor. Or perhaps you could set a trust anchor on your acceptor principle or your initiator principle, saying these are the trust anchors I trust, right? So having a way to provide a little bit more policy at the application or access to a little bit more information that could be used for policy might make for an API that others might want to copy, right?
okay.
I think that might make it more desirable as a working group item then, but the TLS people, for example, are very busy right now anyway, so I don't think they'll care. But if we then decide that we care and someday we'll flog it at them, maybe we should make it a working group item. I don't know.
All right. So I guess next steps on this one is the chairs and possibly our AD will discuss which ones we can start bringing in. I mean, I will note that we've got also this list of documents that still need to even go through. So, I mean, sure, but I'm just saying that, I mean, there's a number of documents in the queue to prep for working group last call. This is an awful lot of work. But we can discuss, see which ones make the most sense to try to bring forward, and maybe we'll go through some sort of staggering exercise.
It's a bit of staggering is good. Yeah, Stephen Farrell, sorry. So yeah, staggering is fine. And I think before you get to the end of that current list, more will have popped up anyway. Well, that seems to be the
sure,
history.
right. That's why I suggested staggering, right? I mean, but we've got an awful lot of things waiting in the wings that are going to require attention. This is a pretty big list. All right, so I think we are actually at our open mic time, which, if nobody's got anything, that gives us 15 minutes.
So I have one thing, Stephen Farrell again. So Sean, as he indicated, I think was the plan was that you guys kind of came in and took over Sam first, and then Sean were transitioning out. So I think Sean has decided now is the time to lose the dot. So thanks to him for all his work over the years, and thanks to you guys for kind of picking up and taking over and doing so well in the meantime. So thank you, Sean. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much, Sean. Right. Anything else? Any other business?
Channeling Jabber, Bill Knowles is saying again with the SASL OAuth draft, another couple of reviewers on the one last language change would be very nice to have. So please look at the mail about the Sasseloff draft.
Going once, twice. All right, I think we're done. That gives you 15 minutes back. Thank you, everybody.
If you have not signed the blue sheets are up front. Please come sign them.
All right.